It feels like just yesterday when we celebrated entering 2022 as a new year. And now we're wishing everybody a happy new year again as it's 2023. Some years back, 2023 seemed very distant, but the reality is it's now here. And as with every new year, we begin to hear the word New Year resolution or resolutions, depending on whether your list is made up of one or more contents. Now let's quickly define the word New Year resolution. This is a decision usually made at the beginning of every new year to either stop certain bad habits or develop certain good habits, or a mixture of both. Many people observe this to develop themselves, and you will all agree with me that this is a very good thing, as we all need to grow. This practice is more popular in the Western world, but not exclusively observed by people there. However, the reception has been somewhat mixed. You find some that love it. You also find others that just simply hate it. And then there are some that are just indifferent about it. But the reason for any of this is usually similar, and this is because most people fail in keeping up with their resolutions. Failure is something that is universally despised and as such avoided. So why begin something that you know you will eventually fail in it? Especially New Year resolutions, which do not only reveal our bad tendencies, but also show us how helpless we are towards getting any better. In fact, New Year resolutions remind us of how weak we can be, which is something that most of us would not love to see. But what if I told you that this same reason is why New Year resolutions are good for you? Yes, seeing that you're weak can be good for you. Let's find out by diving into today's video. I will use the Bible to show you just that. So we already know what a New Year resolution is, and we've seen why it's not totally accepted by everybody. Now let's get to the second why, which is why weakness is good and not something to totally run away from. Everyone has at least one thing that he or she is afraid of. This fear may vary, but one common fear all human beings have is the fear of failure, as I mentioned earlier. And that's why we turn towards strong people to inspire us. We love action figures that exhibit strength. We love to see people overcome obstacles and love to see people attain greatness against all odds. But despite that, we can relate more with people that were initially weak or struggling. And that's because we see ourselves in them, and that makes such characters very relatable to us. We use them to mask our incapabilities or insecurities. But Paul tells us in the Bible to do just the opposite. In 2 Corinthians chapter 12, Paul talked about being glorified, and despite this glorious experience, he had an infirmity that he had cried to God to remove it on multiple occasions. This shows you that despite all of Paul's achievements, as recorded in the Bible, he was still human like us all. But the answer the Lord gave unto Paul was something that made Paul to reply with these words: "Most gladly, therefore, will I glory in my infirmities, that the power of Christ may rest in me." Or as the simpler English translations put it, "I will boast in my weakness." The Lord's answer was just the words before that, and it was, "My grace is sufficient for thee, for my grace is made perfect in weakness." The Message translation puts it as, "My grace is enough, is all you need. My strength comes into its own in your weakness." The passage continued with Paul saying, "Once I heard that, I was glad to let it happen. I quit focusing on the handicap and began appreciating the gift. It was the case of Christ's strength moving in on my weakness." You see, God is a God who does not want your strength to interfere with His. He said in Isaiah chapter 42 verse 8 that "I am the Lord, that is my name. I will not give my glory to another, nor my praise to graven idols." God even described Himself as a jealous God. God is bigger, more powerful than any of us, and the Bible describes His foolishness as still being better than our wisdom. The story about Gideon leading the children of Israel to fight against the Midianites perfectly illustrates that. The Midianites had a huge army of about 135,000 men, whereas Gideon could only recruit about 32,000 Israelites to fight against this army. Obviously, the numbers were not in favor of the Israelites, but despite that, God commanded Gideon to reduce his army to only 300 men, as the battle was not man's, it was the Lord's. As men, we love to give glory to ourselves. We revel in our strength. We pride in our achievements. And this, as we can see, always interferes with what God silently does in us. And that's why weaknesses makes God's works more obvious in our lives. The Bible says that it is God that works in us, both to will and to do according to his good pleasure. And we, having the willingness and the ability, might somewhat thwart his glorious work in us. And this is why our weaknesses need to be made more plain to us, because we are truly weak, and Christ came to give us strength, not strength from our own doings or from inside us, but his strength that transcends every human ability. So instead of running away from whatever reveals how weak you are, why don't you embrace it, so that his grace and his grace alone will be sufficient for you? And you can also say like Paul, that when I am weak, that is when I am strong. We end today's video with Jesus' message in Matthew chapter 11 from verse 28 to 30. It says, "Are you tired, worn out, burned out on religion? Come to me, get away with me, and you'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me and walk with me. Watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me, and you will learn to live freely and light." The invitation is to the weak. Accept it, because the weak in Christ are truly strong. God bless you. If you enjoyed this video and you were touched by it, and you love the content I make, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and also subscribe to my channel. I drop videos every week. Thank you, and I'll see you next week.